Our guest host is Representative Paul Ryan, ranking member of the House Budget Committee, member of the House Ways and Means Committee. David Walker is president and CEO of the Peter G. Peterson Foundation. He's former U.S. Comptroller General, and Robert Napoli was on last week on a phone or managing director. That's what he looks like, in case you were wondering, of Piper Jaffray. Yeah. Saw him last week. We didn't even have a picture, I don't think. Congressman, let me start with you. Just quickly. Thoughts over what happened over the weekend. What do you think?
Well, I've been a big critic of Fannie and Freddie since I got into Congress 10 years ago. I remember being on Fannie and Freddie's oversight committee when I was a freshman congressman, working with people in the Clinton administration Treasury Department, trying to get this genie back in the bottle, trying to cap their activities. Fannie and Freddie have all the benefits of being a private company with none of the risk.
Right.
And so, you know, I've been one of these GSE hawks for a long time, and now those chickens are coming home to roost. Now we don't have many options. We got to get through this rough patch. What I'm worried about is after the dust settles, what is it all going to look like? Are we socializing credit risk in this country? Are we socializing investment risk? Are we going down that path? Are we going down the path of having this debt put on our books, a 50% increase in the public debt? And that would be disastrous. So that's a concern.
It's already been on your books.
Well,
Steve,
it's becoming more explicit these days, that's for sure.
I have 3 guests in 3 minutes.
I'm sorry, Joe. I'm sorry.
Because of our first. Anyway, David, we've seen you worry last time you were in. We've got all these entitlements problems. I guess you can add Fannie and Freddie to things to worry about that we're going to have to fund in the future now, too, right?
Well, potentially. I mean, the fact is, as Congressman Ryan just noted, I mean, you know, the taxpayers are not legally on the hook with regard to Fannie and Freddie. There's a lot of people that assume that we are, but we're not. I mean, what happened here is, frankly, lax lending standards, greed, the big G word, greed, and inadequate oversight by Fannie and Freddie and inadequate oversight by other parties. I think what's key here is we need to find our way out, but the taxpayers should not be on the hook for bailing this thing out. If we've got to do something, we ought to look at something like a Chrysler loan guarantee arrangement or something of that nature, because we should not reward people for bad behavior.
I agree with that.
Bob, you feel better today than you did last week?
Well, I mean, I think what we said on Friday as well was that the government needed to stand up and put their money where their mouth is, and essentially they do this, and this adds confidence, I think, to the debt holders. I think one thing that people misunderstand, and a viewer mentioned earlier, if there wasn't a Fannie or Freddie today, there are no private lenders. So to say we're socializing, it is somewhat, it's been semi-socialized, and right now it is more socialized, and if it wasn't for Fannie and Freddie, home prices would be plunging. They do have enough capital, equity and debt capital, if they have access, equity capital, if they have access to the debt markets. With 75 to 80 billion of capital, it would take massive losses to go through that capital. This cycle probably lasts through 2009 and into 2010. At that point, people will have to revisit how much capital is the right level of equity capital. Clearly, the arguments for the old capital levels being enough will not stand up for anybody.
David, while I have you on, we got to have you on as guest host again, but all the things that we talked about last time you were on, has either candidate, they haven't read your information, I don't think, from your foundation at this point. They were going to balance the budget in 4 years, but we're going to be cutting taxes. I mean, do you see anything coming out of either camp that makes you feel like we might be addressing some of these problems?
Well, first, the candidates are showing that America has a lack of math proficiency. I mean, some of us actually can add. We intend to be able to evaluate each of the major candidates on all the issues the Foundation cares about and to push our evaluation. I've already been in touch with the lead economic advisors of both candidates. We're going to be getting together face-to-face. We want to work on a constructive, nonpartisan, and non-ideological basis. You'll be hearing more about what the Foundation thinks.
Congressman Ryan, I just want to ask you a question about the events over the weekend. Do you support the plan as detailed by the Treasury?
I want to take a look at it more closely. I wasn't supporting this bailout plan before the Barney Frank bill. I didn't support the $300 billion new guarantee, the slush fund that Barney Frank wanted to put in this bill. Looking at the options we have, though, I want to go back and read the fine details of this thing. But I'm very concerned about this.
What about the concept, the idea that the Treasury should invest, really buy equity in these GSEs, one, and two is increase the line of credit?
This is probably the best of the worst options we have. So that's probably where we are. My fear is that we go down to the actual business of putting this debt on our books. So that's the worst option we have at all. So this may be the best option we have of all these bad options. What disappoints me is how we all got to this point in the first place. We've been trying to get this thing fixed for 10 years, and Fannie and Freddie, I would argue, have been thwarting these efforts from a number of us conservatives in Congress to get this done. Now we are where we are, and this is probably, I want to read the details, probably the best of the worst options we have.
Hey, Bob, while we still have you here, I want to take a look at Fannie and Freddie, the bid asks on these two companies, because they are going to open sharply higher, at least based on where we're looking at the bid ask right now. Freddie Mac, 1008 to 1029. Fannie Mae, you're seeing a similar increase, 1295 to 1320 after a 1025 close. Would you be telling people to buy into these stocks at this price?
You know, we have been neutral on the names. It's a tough call. If they can avoid raising additional capital, there is a lot of upside on the stocks, additional dilutive equity capital. The trick is that you don't know where the trigger is, when the government may want to just take all the risk off the table of the survival of the companies and put dilutive equity capital into the businesses. We would lean positively on this news this morning because there is a higher degree of probability that they won't have to raise very dilutive equity capital at these stock prices. It would be very painful. And if they can avoid that as you go through this cycle, there is a lot of upside to the stocks on the other side as you start looking at 2010, 2011 earnings.
David, how did the government made money on Chrysler? What would it look like if it was more of a Chrysler-type plan?
Well, it was a loan guarantee, and the government got an equity kicker as a result of the loan guarantee. There was an oversight board that involved a number of capable people, including the Comptroller General of the United States. And I think that one of the things that we need to keep in mind is, while it's understandable that when you have these difficult situations, you want people like the Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of HUD, and other comparable people, maybe Commissioner of SEC involved. You need some qualified, independent, private sector people involved who are not part of an administration, who can look out for the taxpayers and who are unaligned. And that's something that happens in a number of areas in government, but it would be important here too.
Bailouts all over the place there. I mean, it seems like no one is really going to be accountable. It's like you can always go to the taxpayers. I mean, we have a lot of money, don't we? We can help, can't we?
We have no money.
We don't have any money.
We're in a $53 trillion hole. We've got $40 trillion plus in off-balance sheet obligations already. Washington is out of touch and out of control.
Hey, Joe, I just need to ask Congressman Ryan one question here. As I understand the way the Treasury is going to structure the proposal, it's going to give an open-ended kind of blank check to the Secretary.
Right.
Congress usually doesn't go for that.
Never. So
is there a problem from the get-go here?
Yes, and more an expanded role for the Federal Reserve as well. So what are we talking about at the end of the day here?
Well, the Fed, you've already given them a blank check, just to be fair.
The Fed
you've already allowed
window.
them to lend to the extent that they deem necessary.
That's right.
That's existing legislation.
That's right. And they've opened the discount window to new kinds of borrowers we've never seen before. Now we're going to give the Treasury Secretary the ability to go and buy all this stock.
Are you predicting at this moment that this is a coming problem for this legislation right now, that it has this open-ended blank check to the Treasury Secretary to invest equity in these GSEs?
It is a huge concern of mine, but my guess is this is going to get through the House and the Senate pretty quickly because panic will rule the day in Washington. What I want to know is, what does the world look like after this dust settles?
Right. Hold on. You wouldn't give the President a blank check on the war. Why would you give the Treasury Secretary a blank check on the GSEs?
Well, the President does kind of have a blank check.
Well, but he has to come and he has to give you a number.
That's right.
And you have to at least go through the motions of voting on it.
Okay. So, but underneath that discretionary appropriations we give him, he has a lot of authority.
Fair enough.
All right, gentlemen, appreciate it. And David, we'll see you again soon, hopefully.
In 10 minutes. He's back right now.
Oh, good. All right, good. And Bob, see you later.